welcome to Selling Travel's Travel Talk. Today I'm delighted to be joined by Peter Shanks, Managing Director of Silversea Cruises for UK, Ireland, Middle East and Africa. Hi Peter.
Hello.
How are you doing?
I'm well, thank you. I'm doing well, thank you very much. Bearing up under all this Zoom activity, but staying positive, that's the main thing.
Excellent. So obviously the last few months have been not exactly kind to cruise, I guess you could say. I think it's fair to say the mainstream media hasn't exactly been kind to cruise, and there's been some pretty brutal coverage. Obviously there was the news coverage of the Diamond Princess right at the beginning that everyone will be familiar with. Is there a massive job ahead of you? Obviously there is a massive job ahead of you, but what's your sort of main challenge? Are you going to have to sort of get that trust back? That do you think that how bad do you think it is, basically?
Yes, I think if you go back a little bit, I mean, clearly our first task was to get all of our guests home as best we could. So all the major cruise lines, and certainly Silversea, we had a big task on our hands to get everybody safely home. The next task was to get our crew home, which has been quite challenging. But the industry are sailing their ships across the world to take their crew home and looking after all their crew at the moment. So that process is still not quite finished. So getting the crew home has been really important. And then making sure we lay the ships up for a period to make sure, we're in a very cost-effective layoff mode to be as effective as we can. And from an office perspective, it's been really tough for us because in any given week at Silversea here in London, we would be refunding half a dozen people who may choose to cancel for whatever reasons. And suddenly we're plunged into cancelling hundreds and then thousands of bookings. We've cancelled at Silversea over 100 sailings so far. Mm-hmm. And the pressure that put on all of our teams who are working from home and having to put in a refund process, it's been really hard. And I feel for our travel agents and just say we're doing the absolute best we can, and we are refunding and we are offering future cruise credits. But it's taken time to get that process up and running. And it's only now really that we're getting into an opportunity to start thinking about the future, that we turn our minds to how the industry can have a sort of what we call healthy return to service. And you're right, there was some very harsh commentary in some parts of the press about cruise. And that's understandable because cruise industry has worked remorselessly over the last 10 years in terms of health and safety. And those of our guests and our travel agent partners, and indeed the cruise journalists who go on our ships, they know that we're fanatical about health and safety. And they also recognize the fact that we will return to service with probably the best protocols in the travel industry. But through this terrible period, it was the news journalists who started looking at what's happening on cruise. And therefore some of that coverage just wasn't balanced. But that's okay, that's our job now as an industry, to come out and communicate our new way of working and restore that confidence. And we think that there's every evidence now that the regular cruisers, our loyal guests, they can't wait to sail again. They understand how it works. And so they will be coming back in very good numbers as and when we're ready. But you're right to say that working with travel agents now, the challenge, which was always a challenge, of finding first-time cruisers has got an awful lot harder.
Sure, yeah. So it's the finding the new people, the converting the people new to cruise that's the biggest challenge.
Yes.
So yes. I mean, you touched on it slightly before, but I mean, cruising has had to deal with virus outbreaks before, hasn't it? And norovirus obviously has been an issue on cruise lines. But I mean, yeah, the cruise industry, is probably the best industry to deal with that. And you already have those protocols in place, and I'm thinking back to a time when I've been on a ship before, and I know that before you go into every restaurant, there is always the disinfectant there and things like that.
Yes.
So you've already got all those things in place, which all your regular cruisers will know. But what other steps are you taking? What other measures are you going to put in place?
So it's going to be very careful. A healthy return to service is important, but it doesn't start just with cruise. So we're not likely to be sailing, and you're not likely to see many cruise lines sailing now towards the end of the summer and the autumn, which will be the earliest time that cruise lines begin slowly to come back. Now, between now and then, you'll begin to see airlines open up. Everyone will start to understand how airports work, how airlines work. And then we, in time, over coming weeks, will come out and talk about how our own protocols will work. But at the moment, there's a huge amount of work going on by the cruise lines in the US with the CDC, who look after all health protocols for the government in the US. And here in the UK and in Europe, there are a lot of discussions going on with Public Health England and with the European governments and ports to put in place a minimum standard of protocols that everybody will understand. And that will cover what additional information do we share with guests at the time of booking? What information do we either glean from the guest or tell the guest prior to them traveling to the port or the airport to join a ship? There'll be an awful lot of work done on the protocols before people get on the ship as to how we can make sure we look for, how we can test, and how we can make sure that we don't have anyone on the ship who may be at risk. And then on board the ship, an environment which we're very used to controlling, we're looking at every single aspect of how a ship should operate. Now, importantly, we don't want to spoil the fact that the people are there on holiday to enjoy themselves. And as you mentioned, over many years now, we've had incredibly strong health and safety protocols on ships, but you don't necessarily see it. Yes, everyone goes now and they have the habit of washing their hands before going into a restaurant. You know, when guests are asleep at night, there's a huge amount of cleaning going on around the ship, and that's always been the case. So probably the easiest thing we can do actually is what we control on board the ship, because we're very good at controlling that experience. We then need to make sure that travel insurance comes back. We have to make sure what happens if someone needs to be repatriated from overseas, how will that work? So it's really from start to finish, what are the protocols that the cruise industry can put in place? And then we're very fortunate to work with Clear, who work very effectively with our travel agent partners. And we'll make sure we really well communicate the new protocols, the new normal for cruising as a whole. And then it will be up to each individual brand, each cruise line, to do their own twist on that. So, you know, you may find that in regards with Silversea, because we have smaller ships, that has some advantages. We have more space per passenger. We don't tend to do much with regards to buffets. So there'll be different cruise lines that approach things slightly differently. And I would imagine that certainly when cruises start sailing again, we will certainly not be at high occupancy levels. We will slowly come back with lower occupancy levels and work our way into it very, very carefully. And I think we'll work hard with our travel agent partners, because they're absolutely key to then communicate those new protocols to our guests, both our loyal guests, their guests. And then over time, people will see the cruise industry coming back strongly. They'll see us being a healthy place to go, and we'll begin to see that first-time cruise market come back again. So I'm confident the industry will go above and beyond what people expect, but it's going to take time, and definitely not a race. And we want to make sure we do it properly.
Sure, yeah. I mean, the fact you mentioned the fact that you're smaller passenger numbers, obviously. I mean, yeah. Do you think that obviously does put you at an advantage, doesn't it? Being in the luxury cruising sector, you've got smaller passenger numbers, you've got you know, less more space for people to social distance and things like that.
I think the industry is very, in many ways, over these sort of issues, very collaborative. And I'm hopeful and confident that none of us will turn this into a competitive issue. So I don't think you're saying our ships are bigger so we're better, or our ships are smaller, because we all have the ability with ships these days to do the right thing for our guests. So on a larger ship, there's more space. And on a smaller ship, there are fewer people and more space. But I think you'll find all of us working together to give confidence to all cruisers that coming back is safe, rather than trying to say, you know, our protocols are better than your protocols, because that doesn't help the travel agent. We want the travel agent to understand that cruising as a whole is coming back with a set of protocols that really gives them the confidence to promote cruise and gives people the confidence to come back.
Sure. And for agents, what is the main message that you think that they should be putting out there about cruise right now? Do you think it's time to start selling cruise now, or should they be holding?
We are seeing some green shoots in terms of sales for 2021, certainly. And as each week goes by, that gets stronger and stronger. I think my advice to a travel agent would be to focus on further out sailings at the moment. So one of the things we all do in the industry is we go on sale very early. So Silversea, for example, we're now on sale right up until spring 2022. So if I was thinking about promoting a cruise, I'd be promoting things for the second half of 2021, or in fact winter 21-22. And certainly some of our products, particularly when you think about some of the more iconic holiday opportunities like Antarctica or Galapagos, those tend to be bucket list type special events. And therefore people are in the market for thinking about that in a year's time or a year and a half's time, by which time, touch wood, the world will very much be back to normal. We'll all be operating in the new world with the new normal. So I would be looking to promote cruises if I was an agent further out. And to start with, I'd be focusing on my regular cruisers who do understand. They're very loyal to cruising. They're very loyal to the individual brands. But they can't wait to get back. In fact, we're having to tell them, can you please be patient because we're not ready for you yet. So I think horses for courses, if you've got really committed cruisers, there's an opportunity to maybe get them away to the Caribbean this winter. But if you're wanting to promote cruise with confidence, I'd focus on next summer and the following winter, and maybe think about longer term cruises to very special destinations that people can put in the diary.
Sure. Okay. So a kind of two-pronged approach, you might say.
Yes. Yes.
So, I mean, what is your plan in terms of training agents going ahead in the next few months? So you talked about some of the protocols that you might be introducing. Will you be going out doing training with agents? How will you be communicating the latest protocols to them?
I think so. I think you'll find that Clear will play an active role because there are a lot of travel agents who really do enjoy and get benefit from being part of Clear. And normally when Clear are promoting, they're talking about sales, marketing, opportunities, new destinations. I think over the next few months, you'll see a Clear focusing very much on the new protocols, the new normal, the new way of working within cruise. And that's really useful because they provide an awful lot of training content for travel agents. Mm-hmm. And then you'll find each cruise line, certainly from a Silversea perspective, we'll have our own marketing materials and sales materials. And as we bring back our sales team and rebuild the strength of our sales team across the UK, their focus with travel agents will be on helping them with those tools to talk to their own, to the travel agent's guests, to explain how things are going to work. And I think it'll come back quite quickly if guests will fully understand how professional cruise lines are, and they will rely upon us to do the right thing. And therefore that confidence will build quite quickly once they see that we're back. Yeah.
Do you think that there is anything good to come out of this? It sounds like a strange question, but is there anything, has there been any good publicity in a way, or is there anything that you've learned that you'll take forward?
It's tough to talk about good because there's so many of our friends and colleagues in the industry and our travel agent partners who are having a really tough time. Mm. And this is having a really significant impact on their business. So it's hard to talk about a good. I mean, there is that saying that people use about never waste a crisis. Yeah. We're certainly better at refunding now than we ever were in the past. But that's not something we wanted to get good at. It's something we've had to become good at because it's a new phenomenon. I don't know. I think a shock like this, as happened with 9/11, gives people the opportunity to reassess their business and their priorities and how they invest in their money. So digital, absolutely. The mix of digital spend in marketing versus traditional media spend, I think, will be accelerated. Better use of digital brochures, better use of digital marketing by travel agents to their guests, better use of marketing databases. How good am I at communicating with my guests through my database, and what material can I share? Selling skills will be further enhanced because now we'll be talking about a new thing to talk about, which is the protocols of traveling. And if you think about it, a travel agent, having spent a long time in my career working as a travel agent, two things travel agents do brilliantly. One is to reassure and one is to recommend. So there's never been a better time for a travel agent in terms of guests being uncertain about any type of travel or holiday. And those travel agents who really do what they do well and can really focus on that reassurance piece and recommend what's right for people, that's going to be good for travel agents as business returns, because I think people are going to want to rely upon those travel agents to give them that advice. So I think these shocks, they do create a bit more efficiency from a financial and economic perspective. And the travel industry has a track record through all of these different crises to deal with them well, come out the other side and get better. So now's not the time to talk about, being better, because we're all feeling pretty lousy, if I'm honest, in the midst of this really busy period with our teams working from home. But as it comes back, we'll have learned some things. So in that regard, yes. And from a travel agent perspective, the need to get reassurance and recommendation will, I think, have been accelerated. So those two things of being more effective at what you do
Mhm.
And more people coming to you for that advice puts travel agents in a very good position.
Absolutely, yeah. And I guess the other thing that I'd have to touch on is the government advice. I mean, one of the first things that they did was to ban over 70s, I believe it was, from cruising. How much does your kind of bounce back depend on the government and what measures they bring in, and what would you wish them to bring in?
I think it's quite easy now, and you can see a lot of the media doing it, to be critical of what the government did in the early stages of COVID-19. But I don't think hindsight's very helpful to go back and criticise what governments did. The quick reaction of actually saying over 70 shouldn't travel, I think actually came in after the cruise industry already shut down. So it was a measure which probably wasn't necessary. And I think very much we don't want to be ageist in a way, in that we want our health and safety protocols to look after everybody. And so I don't think age actually comes into it, because we would not do anything unless it was safe for everybody.
Mm-hmm.
And also, who's to decide whether a 73-year-old or an 80-year-old is not fit to travel? Many of our guests, many of the most active guests, even going on expeditions, are young at heart and very active. So I think that over 70 thing, I think already has gone away, because it's bigger than that. The industry, whether it's airlines or cruise lines or holiday companies, need to look after everybody with their protocols, irrespective of their age.
Yeah. So you don't think that, because what is the average age of your customer on Silversea?
It varies through the year. It's probably in the summer months, it's probably somewhere between 50 and 55. And in the winter, it creeps higher than that.
Yeah.
But all of the cruise lines have a complete mix of either multi-generation families or travelers. And it's not just the cruise industry. I'm sure if you spoke to some of the long-haul tour operators like Cooni and Audley Travel, and Trailfinder, some of their most active guests are over 70.
Yeah.
So I think with hindsight, and I did say don't use hindsight, but with hindsight, that over 70 thing sort of crept in as a bit of a measure right at the peak of people not knowing what to do. And now I think it's come to everyone's realization that it's about keeping everybody health as healthy as we can.
Yeah. So you're not too worried about that being a sticking.
No, but working with governments is incredibly important.
Mm.
And that's something the cruise industry actually have always done very well. And there's now a huge amount of work going on between the cruise lines and all the different governments around the world in terms of health and safety protocols, to make sure we do things hand in hand with them to get the right solution.
Okay. So what do you think, looking in your crystal ball now, ahead to when the travel lockdown is finally lifted and we're allowed to cruise and to travel? I mean, obviously we've talked about some of the protocols being brought in, but how much do you think this is going to change cruising realistically?
Well, a number of people have made the obvious comparison to 9/11, when at the time, tragic as that event was, people were saying, well, I'm not going to fly again.
Mm.
And of course, we all got used to taking our shoes off and taking our belts off and not having water when we were going through security. And slowly and quite quickly, in fact, airline industry got back to normal, and we've never seen more people flying than we had up until this latest COVID-19. So I think things will return to normal probably quite quickly. I mean, take yesterday when all the shops opened in London, and we saw the queues of people who wanted to go shopping because it's what they like to do.
Yeah.
So I think within the bounds of being rational and safe, I think things might come back a bit quicker. But there's no question there'll be some longer term impacts. A lot of the industry's new ships will be delayed because the shipyards are being closed. So that's quite good in a way, because there won't be a clamoring for filling more new capacity over the next 12 to 18 months as that's pushed back a little bit. But I think if you say where will cruising be in 3 to 5 years' time, it'll be every bit as exciting as one of the most innovative industries and innovative holiday experiences as it has proven to be over the last 5 to 10 years. And the cruise lines will step up to the challenge, work closely with their travel agent partners, and it will be seen as a rather big bump in the road, but nevertheless, people will still want to travel, still want to explore the world, and the innovation that cruise lines bring and the ability to take people to those destinations will, I think, be undiminished over coming years.
Sure. And I mean, for Silversea, what was the, I mean, pre-coronavirus, what was the kind of big focus for you in terms of innovation?
Well, two things. Well, firstly, we have to grow at Silversea. We have 5 new ships coming. We actually delivered the first of those ships, the Silver Origin, the week before last. So we actually managed to deliver a ship with the shipyard in Holland in the middle of a lockdown, which is a tremendous opportunity. And that ship is ready, and she'll start to sail in Galapagos later this year. Silver Moon was due to be in service in August. She now won't be with us until later in the autumn. We don't have an exact date yet, but we still expect to get Silver Dawn into service at the end of next year. And then after that, 2 further ships yet to be named in our sort of evolution, the next generation of ultra luxury ship. So we've got 5 ships coming. So we need to double our business in the UK, simple as that. And that target, that opportunity, is the same as it was before COVID. It's just going to take us a bit longer, and we'll go about it a bit more cautiously. In terms of innovation for us, it's all about the destination at Silversea. Whether it's taking people into the heart of more popular destinations like the Mediterranean or the Caribbean, or a growing part of our business through our expeditions to Antarctica, Galapagos, and the Arctic. And we have seen some green shoots in destinations like Antarctica and Galapagos because they're going to untouched parts of the world. And it seems people are aspiring to get closer to nature and get away from crowded places, which may play as an advantage to those destinations. But for us, giving people a luxury experience is a given, and we do it very well, particularly through our brilliant crew on the ships. But the opportunity for us is to bring the destination to life. And, you know, we call it being curious. And certainly we find our guests in the UK and around the world are very curious travelers, quite adventurous in their outlook. And so they will want to carry on being curious. And there are lots of parts of the world that we will open up for them. But yes, so we're growing. We have the backing of the Royal Caribbean Group, which has been an enormous advantage for us through the last 3 months, with the financial support and backing of Royal Caribbean and the expertise we're able to share in terms of how we develop new protocols together, and the innovative way that no doubt the Royal Caribbean Group will approach that, has been a tremendous support for Silversea. So, you know, we're cautiously optimistic. We know that we still want to grow. We will grow, and our task now is to share that opportunity with our travel agent partners, get over the hurdle of the healthy return to service, and then get back into a more positive, you know, forward-looking and selling. I've had enough of refunding, if I'm honest with you. We're a booking business. We want to get back into creating dreams for our guests and supporting our travel agent partners. So we're ready to get back into that more positive mentality.
Of course. And I mean, you touched slightly on my next, what was going to be my next question actually, which was destinations. So yeah, I mean, I've noticed that you do round Britain cruises, and I've been reading a lot about how obviously staycations are sort of tipped to be the first bit of the industry to bounce back. And that, but I mean, do you think that places like the Mediterranean, for instance, where traditionally people would be going to sort of cities like Rome, Barcelona, and places like that, do you think that will sort of dwindle in popularity, and that the more sort of untouched places with less people will become a lot more popular?
I think to start with, yes. I mean, I think what we're all thinking, and of course what we think doesn't always happen, but we're thinking that around the world, closer to home sailing will be the way in which the industry comes back. So we know that in Australia, for example, which is a growing cruise market, which has had a really tough time for cruise in recent months through all the publicity, you'll have quite a lot of Australians who want to cruise, but cruise around Australia.
Yeah.
In North America, we're expecting that when cruising comes back, it'll be short cruises in the Caribbean. And certainly in the UK, we're already seeing, you know, some of the green shoots we're seeing are for closer to home sailings, either around Britain or maybe going up to the fjords. So I think there'll be some closer to home sailing. Our biggest seller still at the moment is the Mediterranean. It's incredibly popular. And yes, I think people will want to go to, you know, imagine you're on a ship, you're arriving into Civitavecchia near Rome, and you have an opportunity to go on different excursions. I think quite a few people will be tempted to go on the small, which we do well as a small cruise line, go on a minibus with 7 or 8 other people, go to a small village, go right into understand how they make the local mozzarella and how they farm locally, and do something really, really immerse yourself in that destination. To start with, be more popular than going to see the Trevi Fountain in Rome.
Yeah.
Because people, I think, will want to be a bit more a distance, if you like, from those groups. But once they see it operating successfully, and once they see destinations operating their venues successfully,
Mm-hmm.
then that too will come back, because people will always want to go and see Rome. They'll always want to go and see Florence.
Of course.
But it's down to Florence to prove that they can operate in the new world, that people are feeling safe to go back.
So do you feel like the destinations themselves are as much a part of making consumer confidence better?
Yes. And we'll be working as an industry very hard on our excursion program, because it means so much to the local economy. You know, it's been terrible for Caribbean islands or other parts of the world to lose all this revenue. Yeah. Alaska, for example, Alaska's revenue from cruise lines taking people up to Alaska is a very significant percentage of their revenue as a nation, as a state. And there is no cruise into Alaska this summer. Yeah. Therefore, next year when it comes back, it's in everyone's interest, be it the cruise lines, the hoteliers, the excursion companies, to work together to bring it all back in as safe as possible way, to make sure that economic benefit comes back to that destination. So yes, everyone will be looking at the same thing: the social distancing, the health and safety, the protocols.
Yeah.
And I think common sense will prevail. People these days are very used to having to do things when they travel for either security or health and safety reasons. It becomes second nature. And I think guests will pick that up pretty quickly.
Sure, yeah. And what about ex-UK cruises? Do you think that will be in demand? Because obviously, if you do have people that are, keen to cruise because they're used to it and they know how it works and everything, but they might not be keen to fly.
I think to start with, yes, and then that will dwindle over time. And I mean, the UK already has a big UK cruise market with Royal Caribbean, Celebrity, P&O cruises in the mainstream market. Most of the ultra luxury guests, we do have some round Britain cruises and some very nice cruises that go from, so we take them up to Tower Bridge and then take them either round Britain or up to the Arctic or up to Northern Europe. They will be very popular. But remember, one of the benefits of fly cruise is you get there in 2 hours instead of 3 days on a ship.
Yeah.
So I think Mediterranean-wise, many of our guests would still prefer longer term to fly down to Barcelona and reach their ship and be on the holiday within 3 hours, 4 hours of leaving home, than spending 2 days sailing through the Bay of Biscay to get there. So I think those normal benefits will come back. But to start with, yes, there'll be quite an increased interest in closer to home sailing.
Yeah.
Because you're avoiding one of the potential challenges being an airport.
Okay, so what do you think is your biggest growth area in terms of destinations then? Obviously you've got the Galapagos is expanding for you with a new ship, but what other areas are you moving into? I
think the big destinations will always be the big destinations. So there's sort of the four of them really. There's the Caribbean in the winter, Far East in the winter, and then in the summer there's the Mediterranean and Northern Europe. And there's still an enormous amount of opportunity of destination in those four core destinations. And then I think South America is continuing to, has been growing quite rapidly. Australia and New Zealand is a really popular cruise destination. And then when you move into expeditions, we always talk about the three iconic destinations of Antarctica, the Arctic, and Galapagos. And we're very proud of Galapagos in particular with our new Silver Origin. So we think that's a great opportunity for people to say, now go and experience the best of Galapagos on a beautiful modern ship in Galapagos. So I think that will grow both as a multi-generational more informed families who want to educate themselves together. So I think Galapagos is a star for us going forward. But the world is our oyster. There are so many beautiful places around the world. And given that destination is what we pride ourselves on, we just want to prize out these destinations that people haven't been to before and talk to through our travel agents to say, if you want to experience South America, then doing so on a ship is just one of the best ways of doing it, because you can see so many wonderful destinations in say a 2 or 3 week voyage. So yeah, the world is our oyster, and I think destination is key in all of our opportunities as travel companies. And particularly with Silversea, we go to over 1,000 places. And I always say we go to places I didn't even know were places. So whilst the big hitting destinations will always be the big hitting destinations, I think over coming years you'll see an increased growth in the smaller, newer destinations. And maybe, yes, as you mentioned earlier, if you want to go to places where there are fewer people these days, then we may have an advantage in that with some of our further away and unique destinations.
Sure. Can you just give us an example of 3 places that I don't know, an agent might not have known was a place, as you say?
Well, there's a place called Kangalusak, which is an airport we use to go to the Arctic. There's a place, I think I pronounce it Petroplovac or somewhere like that. I'm embarrassed to not get it right, but that's when we go on our Russian Far East cruises. There are places, Ushuaia. Yeah. So Ushuaia is where you have to go to get on an Antarctica cruise. So for me personally, the cruise I would love to do, and the cruise that I think will become even more iconic in coming years, is Antarctica.
Yeah.
Because you're going to what they call it's the closest thing to being on another planet while still being on this planet. And with everyone wanting to experience the environment at its absolute freest, and particularly now with people wanting to get away from busy places, I think Antarctica is somewhere that I would recommend agents think about as an iconic destination for winter, and for winter 21-22 is where I would start.
Sure, yeah. And I mean, I guess the only other question I would ask related to that would be, how do you balance your desire to move into these new small places with trying to mitigate the effects that might have on the environment, on the communities? Do you?
That's hugely important, and the way we do it is to partner with those communities. So there are, if you take Antarctica, for example, there's incredibly strict associations that we're members of. And if you go on an Antarctica cruise, we are so fanatical about not leaving a footprint anywhere. So, you know, and it's the same in Galapagos, where you need to operate with a license. There are no more new licenses allowed in Galapagos. And whether you're in Antarctica or you're in Galapagos, before anyone steps off the ship, they have to go through what's called our boot room. And we'll be as fanatical as checking the Velcro on their jackets to make sure there's nothing caught in the Velcro before they then get into the Zodiac. And the same when they come back. In Galapagos, for example, the Silver Origin, interesting, is a ship that will never go into port. You know, we only take guests out to the ship on the Zodiacs, and it has no anchor either, because we don't want to damage the seabed. So it has a satellite-driven a system that positions the ship exactly where it needs to be all the time. So we have no anchors, and that's the way that ship is designed. So a lot of people have spoken about one of the outcomes of this terrible event has been the environment. And it should really accelerate our view on the environment and how important helping the environment is. And as each new ship comes out, they're incredibly more efficient and burning the right fuels. So as an industry, we haven't really shouted very much about the environmental benefits we've brought, but we've all been working incredibly hard on our protocols in that area, and rightly so. And lastly, when one of our expedition ships might be off the coast of Africa, and we take, say, 100 guests into an African village, it could be the only time that village sees any Western travelers in the year. And therefore, we really work hard to make that very special for that community, and to take things with us to give to that community. And the benefit it gives to that community is wonderful, as we do for the Caribbean. The impact of cruise lines investing in Caribbean islands and investing in tourism is super important, and that's something that particularly the larger cruise lines do. But wherever we go in the world, we have to be very cognizant of the environment we're in and the communities that we're going to visit. And it's one of the things that our guests enjoy the most, you know, their ability to be able to meet different communities and cultures around the world. And it means a huge amount both to our guests and to those communities that we meet. So yeah, we are absolutely committed to everything to do with developing communities and the environment, and that hasn't changed at all. If anything, through this crisis, it's been accelerated.
Yeah, I think I'd agree with that. Yeah, I think everyone's thinking about it a bit more. Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you very much for talking to us. I'll ask you one more question. I think you already said, but where is your first cruise that you would like to go on when the travel lockdown is lifted?
I think I'll go where I'm told, to make sure I'm supportive of our back to service protocols and to be seen and to be present and support the wonderful ship's company. But if I could choose to cruise somewhere, I am desperate to go to Antarctica, because when I talk to people, friends who've been now with us, and to our guests, it's just an emotional experience which I can't wait to do. So I think for me personally, Antarctica is the place I'd like to go. But as we bring ships back, I will go where I'm told, to make sure I support our crew, who throughout this have just been, as ever, remarkable people.
Sure. And with the crew, I mean, how, I guess you've got crew all around the world who are just waiting to go back. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
They are a most amazing, across just not, I've known through my many years at Cunard and also now with Silversea, the crew and officers on board the ships are the ones that work the miracles. And when we hear about guests, we have an awful lot of social media from our loyal guests. And the one thing they're all wanting to know is, how are the crew?
Yeah.
Have they got home safely? How are their families? And a lot of them will communicate with our guests. So yeah, the crew have been uppermost in our mind throughout this, because they're part of the magic that we all deliver. And we can't wait to bring them back, and they can't wait to come back.
Sure, I imagine, yeah. And they're from how many different countries? Could you hazard a guess?
A lot. I mean, it's hard to think of a country they're not from. I think we have someone from pretty much every country in the world.
Amazing. Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you very much for talking to us, and yeah, hope everything goes well as the green shoots start to come back, as you said.
You're welcome, and I hope things come back for our travel agent partners too, because they deserve things to come back as fast as they can.